confess. The word hangs between them like a blade. Yuki's throat closes. She's 22, telegraph operator from Okinawa, and she's been a prisoner for exactly 3 days. The American soldier, Private Davis, maybe 20 himself, holds something that makes no sense. A measuring tape. Yellow, the kind her mother used for sewing. Kokuhaku Shiro, the translator says. His Japanese is broken, accent thick. Kokuhaku Shiro to Ita Iru. They want us to confess our crimes, but Davis isn't holding interrogation tools. No bamboo, no water, just that yellow tape, and he's looking at them like he's confused why they're crying. 78 Japanese women POWs in the entire Pacific Theater. That's it. Out of hundreds of thousands of prisoners, they are 0.001%. Yuki is one of them. So is Michiko, 31, former nurse, still wearing her medic armband under her torn uniform, and Reiko, 19, who worked in a munitions factory until the bombs stopped falling and the Americans came. The line forms. Single file. The tent smells like diesel and canvas and fear. Davis approaches the first woman. The tape unspools with a metallic whisper. The morning air is cold enough that their breath clouds between them, and Yuki can see his hands shaking slightly. Not from cold, from something else. Quick question before we continue. What city are you watching from right now? Comment below. I want to know how far this moment travels, this story that's been buried for decades. The translator speaks again. Sergeant Mills, 28, 6 months of Japanese training at Camp Savage. Not enough. Not nearly enough for what's about to happen. Confirm your identity, Davis had said in English, but Mills translates it as Kokuhaku Shiro. Confess. One word. Wrong word. And everything that follows stems from that. Davis kneels. The tape extends. He's measuring something, but it's not their necks, not their wrists for shackles. He starts at hip height, and Michiko, the nurse, suddenly goes very still, like she's realized something the others haven't. The tape is cold against fabric, metal end precise. Davis writes numbers on a clipboard, pencil scratching in the morning quiet. He doesn't touch them, doesn't grab, just measures. Hip width, waist, height. Yuki's mind races. In Japan, they'd heard stories. What Americans do to women prisoners. The propaganda films, the warnings. They are animals. They will use you for experiments. But this isn't that. This is something else. Something that makes even less sense. The tape retracts. Click. Davis moves to the next woman, but the tape isn't going around their necks. The tape touches her hip. Yuki stops breathing, not because it hurts, because she doesn't understand why he's doing this. The American, Davis, writes another number, moves the tape to her waist. The metal end is cold through her uniform, and she can smell his soap. Lye. Same kind they used in Okinawa before the world ended. Shintai, Sokati, Mills says, trying to explain. But the words come out wrong. Body inspection, not body measurement. Every woman in line hears inspection and thinks the worst. Reiko starts crying. 19 years old, factory worker, 3 days since capture. She's never been measured for anything except a work uniform. Now an enemy soldier has a tape against her body, and the translator keeps using words that sound like confession, inspection, examination. Here's what Mills doesn't know. In Japanese military culture, body inspection meant something else. Meant searching for contraband, meant humiliation, meant things they'd rather die than experience. 94% of U.S. military translators had less than 6 months of Japanese training. Mills is one of them. Every word he mistranslates makes this worse. Davis finishes with Yuki, writes, height 5'2", waist 26, hip 35. She doesn't know these are standard U.S. military medical intake measurements. Doesn't know every POW gets them. Men, women, everyone. For uniforms, for medical records, for Geneva Convention documentation. The pencil scratches against the clipboard. Behind them, a diesel generator hums, powering lights they don't need yet. It's morning, but the tent is dark. Everything smells like canvas and motor oil and fear sweat. Michiko watches. The 31-year-old nurse understands something the others don't. She's seen American medical procedures before, in medical journals from before the war. This isn't interrogation. This isn't what they think. But how can she explain? If she speaks up, reveals she knows English, knows American procedures, what then? Will they think she's a spy? A collaborator? The line moves. Each woman measured, each number recorded. Davis is methodical, professional, doesn't touch more than necessary. But they don't see medical protocol. They see power, humiliation, the thing they were warned about. Nays? Someone whispers. Why? Mills tries again. Kakunin. Confirm. But it comes out wrong. Sounds like kokuhaku. Confess. The mistranslation spreads down the line. They think they're being measured for something terrible. Experiments, trafficking. The propaganda films showed American scientists measuring Asian skulls, proving racial theories. Michiko's hands clench. She knows. She understands. And she can't stay silent anymore. She steps forward, opens her mouth. 3 words in English are about to change everything. Then Michiko does something that could get her killed. Michiko steps forward and speaks English. 3 words. Medical intake protocol. The tent goes silent. Even the generator seems to pause. Davis looks up from his clipboard. Mills, the translator, stares at her like she's grown another head. The other women step back. Touching her shadow might mean death. She's 31, former nurse, trained in Tokyo before the war, when they still had American medical journals in the libraries. She knows exactly what's happening. You're checking for pregnancy, she says. Her English is accented but clear. Hip-to-waist ratio. Captain Rodriguez enters the tent. 35 camp medical officer, been processing POWs for 6 months. He looks between Michiko and Davis, then at the measurements on the clipboard. You speak English. I am nurse. Was nurse. Uso da, Haruko hisses. 24, former school teacher, convinced Michiko is lying to save them. She's making deals with them. But Michiko continues. Standard measurement. Height, weight, hip-waist ratio, for uniform, for medical record, yes? Rodriguez nods slowly. Tell them, explain. And here's where everything breaks. Michiko turns to the other women and tries to explain American military medical protocol to people who've been told Americans are demons, who've been warned about medical experiments, who cannot reconcile the word confess with measuring tapes. The canvas tent flaps in the morning wind. Inside, it smells like iodine from the medical supplies stacked in corners, bandages, sulfa powder, things they haven't seen in months. It's not what you think, Michiko says in Japanese. They measure everyone, men too, for clothing sizes, for medical records. Nas hippu? Why hips? Michiko pauses. She knows. Hip-to-waist ratio, combined with weight changes, is the fastest non-invasive pregnancy screening. The Americans are checking for pregnant POWs. Geneva Convention requires special treatment for pregnant prisoners. Extra rations, medical care, repatriation priority. But how does she explain this to women who think they're about to be experimented on? Standard U.S. military medical intake. Height, weight, hip-to-waist ratio for uniform sizing. That's the official line. But there's more. There's always more. Davis continues measuring. More careful now, explaining each move to Michiko, who translates. Real translation this time. Not Mills's broken Japanese that turned confirm into confess. The women start to understand, start to breathe. But the damage is done. They've already felt the terror, already believed they were being catalogued for something worse. Tomoko, 29, mother of two, hand instinctively moves to her stomach. She's been hiding something for 4 months. The measurements weren't for uniforms, hip-to-waist ratio, for pregnancy detection. Rodriguez holds up the Geneva Convention Handbook. Article 14 is bookmarked, worn from use. Pregnant prisoners of war shall be transferred to neutral countries or receive specialized medical care, additional rations, and priority repatriation. The truth hits the women like cold water. They weren't being catalogued for experiments. They were being checked for protection under international law. Lieutenant Kim enters. 26, Korean-American nurse. Parents immigrated in 1920. She speaks Japanese better than Mills ever will. Her presence changes everything. An Asian face in American uniform. We check all female POWs, Kim explains in perfect Japanese. If pregnant, you receive 2,800 calories daily instead of 2,000, fresh milk, vitamins, clean bedding changed twice weekly, doctor visits. Ninshin. The word spreads through the line like wildfire. Pregnancy. Tomoko's hand presses harder against her stomach. 4 months hidden. 4 months of terror. That discovery meant death. In Japanese military culture, pregnant women were burdens. Here, apparently, they were protected. The irony burns. Geneva Convention Article 14, written in 1929, 16 years before this moment. Japan signed it, but never ratified it. These women are receiving protections their own government denied them. Davis continues measuring. The numbers tell stories. Normal ratio is 0.7 to 0.85 for women. Pregnancy changes it. Weight distribution shifts. The tape doesn't lie. Feet shuffle on the concrete floor. Someone is crying, not from fear now, but from something else. Shame. They assumed the worst. Believed propaganda over evidence. The measuring tape was medical protocol, not degradation. Mills stands in the corner, realizing his mistranslation caused this. 6 months of language training at Camp Savage. Not enough to prevent confirm becoming confess. Not enough to prevent terror. Watashi tachi wa machigeta ita. We were wrong. But were they? They'd been told Americans would conduct medical experiments, use Asian prisoners for research. The propaganda films, the warnings, the stories whispered in training camps. How could they know this was different? Lieutenant Kim measures Tomoko, writes the numbers, pauses, measures again. The ratio is off. Weight distribution changed. 4 months of change hidden under a loose uniform. When was your last cycle? Kim asks quietly in Japanese. Tomoko's silence is answer enough. Behind her, 2 more women show similar measurements. Sachiko, 27, widow, husband died at Iwo Jima. Another woman who won't give her name yet. 3 pregnant POWs out of 78. They're about to receive treatment that would seem impossible if they hadn't seen it themselves. 3 women's measurements flag the system. Tomoko's hand moves to her stomach. 4 months hidden. The revelation breaks her. Not because she's discovered, but because of what follows. Lieutenant Kim doesn't report her for burden on resources, doesn't send her to isolation. Instead, she calls for Nurse Williams, 24, from Iowa, smiles like Tomoko's sister used to. Prenatal vitamins, Williams says, holding out a bottle. Start today. Akachan wa ikite iru. The baby is alive. Tomoko whispers it like a prayer, like she can't believe it. 4 months of hiding, of eating less so others wouldn't notice weight gain, of binding her stomach with torn fabric. Sachiko stands next. 27, pregnant widow, 3 months along. Her husband died at Iwo Jima, never knowing. She expected punishment for carrying an enemy's child, even though that enemy was her husband, even though the war made everything enemy and ally meaningless. The third woman finally gives her name. Fumiko, 25, factory worker, 2 months pregnant. Here's what happens next. They're moved to a separate section. Not isolation, better quarters. Actual beds, not floor mats. Wool blankets, 2 each. A window that opens. The rations arrive within hours. 2,800 calories daily versus standard 2,000. But it's not just quantity, it's quality. Powdered milk that tastes like sweetness itself after months of rice and salt. Canned fruit. Fresh vegetables when available. Protein that isn't mysterious. The other women watch through the doorway, some with envy, some with confusion, most with a dawning realization that everything they believed was wrong. Hip measurements were fastest non-invasive pregnancy screening. No blood tests needed, no invasive exams, just mathematics and ratios. The Americans had perfected it, processing thousands of POWs across the Pacific. Davis, Private Davis, who started this with his measuring tape, brings the supplies himself. 20 years old, from Oregon, joined the medical corps because he couldn't stomach killing. His sister is pregnant back home. Maybe that's why his hands are gentle when he delivers the vitamins. Arigato, Tomoko says. Thank you. First time she's thanked an American for anything. But Sachiko stands apart. Holds the milk ration in her hands like it's burning her. The widow whose husband died fighting these same Americans who now feed her child. Not deserved, she says in broken English. Not deserved. Williams doesn't understand. How could she? In American culture, pregnancy means protection, celebration, support. In Japanese military culture, pregnancy meant shame, burden, weakness. The milk sits untouched on Sachiko's bed. The vitamins remain in their bottle. And the other women watch, understanding her conflict even as their own bodies crave what she's refusing. But one woman refuses the extra rations. Sachiko pushes the milk away. Not deserved, she says. The American confusion is immediate. Nurse Williams, Lieutenant Kim, even Chaplain Morrison, 42, from Alabama, carries candy for children, cannot understand. Why refuse help? Why deny nutrition your baby needs? Shikata ganai. It cannot be helped. Sachiko repeats it like a mantra. Accepting fate, accepting punishment, accepting that she deserves nothing from the people who killed her husband. Enter interpreter Tanaka. 30, Nisei, parents locked in Manzanar while he serves the country that imprisoned them. He understands both sides of this moment like no one else can. It's not about the food, he explains to Williams. It's about deserving kindness from enemies. In Japanese culture, accepting charity creates obligation, debt, burden. But deeper than that, Sachiko believes suffering is her path. That accepting American milk means betraying her husband's memory. The measuring tape that started this sits coiled in Davis's pocket. Yellow fabric tape, ordinary thing, now witness to extraordinary cultural collision. He pulls it out, looks at it, puts it back. 71% of Japanese POWs initially refused medical treatment, thinking it was experimentation. But this is different. This is refusing help they know is real, because accepting it means something worse than death. Dishonor. Tomoko tries to convince her. The baby didn't choose this war. But Sachiko sits on her bed, hands folded, milk untouched. The metal cup sweats condensation in the Pacific heat. Vitamins remain bottled. Her body needs them, visible in how her hands shake, how her skin has lost color. But her honor needs refusal more. Morning frost forms on the windows. It's December 1945. War's been over 4 months, but not in their minds, not in the space between enemy and human. Chaplain Morrison tries next, sits beside her, doesn't speak for 10 minutes. Then, your husband, would he want his child to suffer? The question breaks something. Sachiko's composure cracks. Tears she's held for 3 months, since learning she was pregnant, since her husband died, since capture. Kare wa shiranai. He doesn't know. He'll never know. But Fumiko, quiet Fumiko who barely speaks, says something that changes everything. He knows. Through the child, he knows. The room goes still. Even the Americans who don't understand the words feel the weight. Sachiko's hand moves to the milk, trembles, stops, moves again. She drinks. 1 sip, then another. Not for herself, not for the Americans, for the child who will carry her husband's memory into a world he'll never see. 6 months later, Tomoko gives birth. The first cry in the camp isn't from fear, it's from life. June 1946. Tomoko's son arrives at 3:47 a.m., delivered by Dr. Harrison, 38, from Boston, lost his own son at Normandy. The baby weighs 7 pounds, 2 ounces, healthy, perfect. First Japanese child born in American custody on Philippine soil. She names him James, after the guard who brought her vitamins. Davis's first name is James. The camp transforms. These hardened guards, these men who fought across the Pacific, who saw friends die, who were taught to hate, they're bringing baby clothes, handmade rattles. One sergeant from Texas sends his wife's breast pump through military mail. America jin wa akachan wo tasuketa. The Americans saved the babies. 12 babies born to Japanese POWs in American camps. 100% survival rate. In Japan, 1945, infant mortality was 40%. Starvation, disease, no medical supplies. But here, in enemy custody, every baby lives. Sachiko delivers next. A girl, she names her Hope, in English, not Nozomi in Japanese. Hope, because that's what the child represents now. Midwife Ito, 45, delivered hundreds of babies in Tokyo before the bombs, works alongside American nurses, teaches them Japanese lullabies, learns Americans' sterilization techniques. The medicine transcends the war. Baby James cries at night. The sound echoes through the camp, and guards who haven't heard baby cries since leaving home stop to listen. One brings a teddy bear his mother sent for when you have kids. Another donates his wool socks for baby clothes. Talcum powder dusts everything. Formula warming on hot plates. The medical tent smells like life instead of death. Dr. Harrison documents everything. Birth weight, APGAR scores, developmental milestones. These children, born between enemies, growing up between worlds. He knows they're witnessing something unprecedented. The women who measured wrong, who triggered the system with their hip-to-waist ratios, are now mothers in enemy custody, receiving better care than they would have at home. The irony isn't lost on them. Davis visits, brings the measuring tape. For baby clothes, he says. Measures tiny James for a jumper his mother is sewing in Oregon. The same tape that started in terror now measures hope. These babies, James, Hope, others, will grow up speaking both languages. They'll become translators, teachers, bridges between nations that tried to destroy each other. But that's decades away. Right now, Tomoko holds James while Sachiko feeds Hope, while American guards bring condensed milk and Japanese mothers sing lullabies their enemies learn to hum. 40 years later, Yuki would return to that camp. The yellow tape is under glass now. Yuki donated it. October 1985. The camp is a museum. Where barracks stood, there's an education center. Where the medical tent processed terrified women, school children learn about reconciliation. Yuki is 62. Silver hair, professor at Tokyo University, teaches American literature. She stands before the display case, and beside her, impossible but real, stands Davis. 60 now, pediatrician in Portland, flew 14 hours for this. "You kept it?" she asks. "You said to. That day you left, you said, keep it, remember." 23 of the 78 women POWs attend this reunion. 18 married Americans after the war. Not guards, that would be too Hollywood, but soldiers they met later, during occupation, during rebuilding, during the years when enemy became ally. James is here. Tomoko's son, 40 years old, works as a translator for Sony. Speaks perfect English, perfect Japanese, perfect bridge between worlds. He shakes Davis's hand, the man whose measuring tape started everything, whose first name he carries. "Wakaranakata, demo ima wakaru." We didn't understand. Now we do. The museum curator explains to visiting students. This measuring tape represents the moment misunderstanding became understanding. When confess was mistranslated from confirm. When standard medical protocol was mistaken for humiliation. But it represents more. It's the object that started as an instrument of terror, became a tool of care, measured babies instead of prisoners, and now teaches new generations about assumption and reality. Sachiko's daughter Hope is here too. 39 doctor at Tokyo General, specializes in prenatal care. She touches the glass case. Inside, the yellow tape coils like memory itself. The photographs on the walls show the progression, terrified women in line, confused guards trying to explain, pregnant mothers receiving care, babies in American military blankets, the whole impossible story. Davis speaks to the crowd. "We were kids, 20 years old, processing prisoners, following protocols. We didn't know the translator was getting it wrong, didn't know they thought we were experimenting on them." Yuki responds, "We were terrified, believed propaganda over evidence. Thought measuring meant cataloging for experiments. Both sides were wrong. Both sides were just trying to survive." Here's the question they leave for visitors. In that moment, terrified, language failing, propaganda screaming in your head, would you have trusted the enemy with a measuring tape? Would you have believed kindness was possible? The yellow tape sits under museum glass. Ordinary thing, extraordinary story. Proof that humanity's greatest failures, miscommunication, fear, assumption, can become its greatest lessons. Sometimes the smallest objects carry the heaviest truth.